Yes, I understand. Very well. Glad we could finally get this group together. Great to see Well, yeah, we can find it. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Everything. Trying to get them
Perfect. Do you want me to go ahead and kick it off? You want me to kick it off? Okay. Well, welcome back, everybody. After a couple of years being away, it's good to see a bunch of smiling faces. Welcome to Las Vegas. My name is Nathan Adam with Belmont University, and welcome to MEIEA 2023. Now, if you have a device, a laptop, tablet, etc., today's roundtable was going to be myself and the chief engineer for Lander.com, as well as the faculty member at Middle Tennessee State University, Daniel Rowland. He was not able to make it. So in lieu of that, we are still going to have the same discussion about artificial intelligence and augmented and virtual reality as it relates to audio production and audio education and entertainment education. So what I would like to do is share my Zoom screen out. So if you remember how to do that from a couple of years ago, I believe Armin is sending out a link to my Zoom so you can use your phone, tablet, or just sit near a friend that has a device if you'd like to be able to see things as we're kind of like showing some of the different examples and what's out there. But you certainly don't need to, and you can still participate in the discussion. So anything else, Armin or Bruce, anyone else here? Awesome. Okay, so if you want to jump to that, if you click your email, throw me a thumbs up whenever you have that Zoom link open. And we'll let everybody do this. I'm just going to pretend you're all up on your computer screen.
This is like
Your room Wi-Fi, yeah, for the whole hotel, yeah. I see a bunch of people just joined here. There's no meeting Wi-Fi. It's just are you staying? Yeah, so you just use your room. That's nice. Oh. I can go ask if there's a separate meeting. Oh, you're good. Oh, okay.
Got it.
You guys are gonna want to.
Oh, there's a bunch of things. Sweet. I'm just muting people left and right over here. It feels like 2020 all over again.
This is a round table room. It's not.
All right. I believe we're close. All right. Oh, just mute this for a second. Perfect. Check 1, 2. Right. Is that working for everybody? You should be able to mute your device or just turn down your audio as well. And then that will minimize the amount of feedback we have echoing around the room. Sweet. All right, we got something here. Okay, so today I was asked to speak with Daniel about, and this was the topic that was given to us. The computers took over at midnight. AI, AR, VR, and how technology is impacting higher ed. Yeah, they're getting it. It's all right. It's just been a couple of years since COVID. Turn your volume all the way down on your phone. Let's try and off. Check 1, 2. Yeah, I could do that. All right, sweet. So just a real quick intro kind of to who I am and why I've spent the last 20 years deep diving into what the future of tech is as it relates to our industry. Just to spend a few seconds talking about that. Like I said, my name is Dr. Nathan Adam. I'm a professor at Belmont University. I've been there since 2010. Prior to that, I spent 10 years teaching at Middle Tennessee State University and a small program in Southeast Kansas before that, starting my career back at Sweetwater. So I've been teaching now audio engineering or in the entertainment industry for 22 years. Since right before 9/11, actually, for those that remember that. Like a lot of your students, I was once a musician that was just trying to figure out how to get my ideas out into the world. And at the time, I saw this big shift that was happening. Everything was moving from large format consoles and analog tape machines into the computer. So in the late 1990s, I started deep diving into what that was going to look like. Ultimately spending time at Sweetwater after I finished my grad degree, and then moving on to teaching at Middle Tennessee State, like I said, through the 2000s, and then Belmont since 2010. Along the way, I started writing and producing the first books and long-form tutorials on recording and mixing. You're probably aware that some place like YouTube now has roughly 50 billion hours worth of tutorials for every known piece of software. By the time we were creating those, it didn't exist. We actually didn't have a way to screen cap software otherwise. So that led to other projects like creating multiplatinum.com, which was the first site, selling long-form courses on recording and mixing, as well as exploration into other technologies with our studio and venue like projection mapping, working with the Grammys, and then ultimately doing a lot of production and other things, including speaking at TEDx on the future of virtual reality as it relates to education. So that's just a little bit of background on me. But I'd love to start the discussion by talking about your experiences with any of these emerging technologies, AI or augmented and virtual reality in your programs. And what are you seeing, or what are you seeing your students using? So floor is open. Does anyone currently have students using any of the generative AI audio tools or software inside your programs? Nobody?
Well, I think.
Fascinating. Yes, ma'am.
I'm in the industry program.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be doing that in my course. In our engineering.
For sure. For sure.
They are.
Okay.
There's augmented reality projects going on. Over here and there.
Yeah.
But I'm not close enough to that.
Very cool.
Because that's not.
How about something like generative AI or chat GPT for your music industry classes, for teaching, for writing? How many of you are already seeing or at least exploring the use of those?
Not voluntarily.
Not voluntarily, yeah. How many of you have found yourselves in this thrust upon you at the beginning of the school year because now students could, with a text prompt, generate a gigantic paper that was surprisingly good, but possibly still full of some BS? Is that everybody else in the room? Yeah, we've all run across that. So today I just want to run through real quick and kind of show you a quick overview of what tools are out there, what is happening in this space, so that you're aware, whether it's the classes you teach specifically or not. But there are pretty substantial changes coming to our entire industry, and as well as the way that the industry creates music. So I'll just kind of run through a few of these, and then it's always open for questions. Like I said, it's a roundtable discussion, not really a presentation. But I think one of the things that people have found most shocking is how AI is moving from just something that we use in like mixing and mastering over the last 10 years, as we've seen tools like Lander evolve that let anybody use AI to master a track, to now we're seeing finally generative AI in music creation and the actual production process. So you're seeing apps like BandLab's Song Starter, where you can literally just make these choices, what kind of music you want, click get started, and then it'll use AI to generate essentially a starting point for your song. And so if you see that here on your screen, is my screen sharing okay? Sweet. So it's going to go through, generate some ideas. And like you may have seen in something like ChatGPT, you can choose how many ideas do I want? What flavors do I want them to have? And as it goes through, we'll give it just a second. It's going to suddenly pop up with multiple different styles of music or multiple different elements in different styles. You can choose those different ideas. Listen to them. You can roll the dice if you want to create something different. Or once you've got this song starter ready to go, you can just click open in Studio and it opens it up in their software based or their web-based DAW. So here you can see it just opened up this session that was just created. And of course, every one of these files can be can have the software instrument that they're using changed. They can be edited or mixed inside of here. Song Starter can use generative AI to get anybody, even musically unskilled people, to start creating tracks very quickly. So that's just one of the tools that's happening right now in terms of creating music. Another one, though, has got a lot of the songwriters thinking, and that's this Ava AI. Ava AI is mostly used for creating library music or stock music, to where you can choose, when this pops up here, you can actually choose exactly what style or genre that you're wanting, and then it will create new compositions. And when you create those, which you'll see on the screen here, if I create this new composition, it does the same thing by initially asking you to choose a general style or a generation profile. And then once you've done that and you click create, it asks what key signature you'd like it to be in, what the duration is, up to 3 minutes, and then how many different compositions you want it to generate every time. And so when you choose that and click create tracks, seconds later, you're going to have a whole new production, new composition here. Sounds like whatever you ask it to be. Again, these are not pre-recorded loops. This is not music that exists already. Tool. So that's got songwriters, music producers, catalog music library creators, all really starting to think about how these tools are going to impact them, impact the work available for them, and then of course impact their workflow when they're using these tools to create new types of music. How many of you have used or have students in the audio engineering sides of your programs using something like Lander, the AI-based mastering program? Okay, so several different audio engineers. Yes, yeah, Daniel is the chief engineer for Lander. And when it first came out almost 10 years ago, it was, he's made the joke before that he had a target on his back because he was one of the first audio engineers to actually start to go over and start working for a company that at the time, the big question was, well, can you use AI in music production? Like, isn't the soul of a human like involved in the mixing or mastering or production process? And I think something that Lander has shown is that you can use these tools to eliminate a whole lot of the technical part of the process to get a pretty good mastered track. And at the same time, it's something that that there's more songs needing to be mastered than ever. And so mastering engineers have not found themselves completely out of work, but rather they have new tools now that will enable anybody to get a great start and still be able to continue to learn or expand their skill set. So Lander has continued to grow and is now not just moved into the AI mastering space, but is also creating all sorts of other tools to enhance things like AI mixing. And so for those, how many of you are involved teaching in the audio side of your programs? Anybody here teaching audio engineering? Okay, so just a couple of people. So another one that is making huge waves is Mix Monolith. And I've brought this up here. And this is an application you can go through and put onto every single track of your song. And you basically go through, tell it to learn all the channels, and then you play through the song a couple times. It analyzes each and every track. You tell it what sort of style or instrument it should be, and then it goes through and it automatically mixes them all, getting you 95% of the way to a finished mix at the click of a couple of buttons. So suffice to say, just these on the music production and mixing side of things are going to be transformative for anyone like us that teaches in audio engineering, music creation, music production, because it is going to completely democratize who can create a professional sounding song. So all of these things are currently have tens of thousands at minimum users, but to hundreds of thousands in the case of something like Lander.com. So it's a pretty substantial sea change for people working in audio and music production. Before I go on, I just want to pause for a second. Let's talk about some of these.
So I'm just curious, are these free? Are they like tiered for, like subscription based for so different tiers get you different access?
Absolutely. Totally depends on the application itself. So Lander, for example, has most of them are moving to the software as a service model to where they offer some sort of subscription, usually in multiple tiers. And then the smaller tiers get you a certain amount of productions or masters or songs that you can work on. And then as you move up to the others, you get access to additional features. So all of them are following the playbook of build a community around your software as well. And so we're seeing a pretty huge uptake in adoption, especially by college students or anyone working with high school students as well.
So this all boils down to ownership, right? And so composition here is all about a click.
Yeah.
Right? And so isn't there a way, can't they create a system that tracks who did the actual click and when
Mhm.
and how, and you own the click?
There's a number of companies working on that in the blockchain space, because blockchains like Ethereum, or really there's a lot of different cryptocurrency based systems that are attempting to do that now, to where they're putting a unique hash, for example, on every mix or every audio file that comes out of a audio workstation, and then that can be followed through subsequent generations of the file. No one has done this at scale yet to where there's been mass market adoption, and most of the crypto space is still fairly challenging to use if you're not a really technical user. But the reality is it's coming, and somebody's going to nail the process of being able to tie payments back to creators. But it's not there yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, great question. Yes.
Couple of things, are these like APIs that, let's say, for example, we smile,
Mhm.
plug it, pump it into Pro Tools.
Yeah.
Whatever job you're using. Does it use the Pro Tools plugins, or does it have its own internal signal?
It's a great question. Well, this mixed monolith is not the only one in the audio engineering space that's attempting to do AI enhanced mixing or AI assisted mixing. And in their case, you put a specific plugin on every track, or you put this plugin on every track, typically at the end of the signal chain, and then have it learn. So you can have other plugins before it or after it, depending on how your DAW is set up. But the fact that it can take so much of the workload off of mixing, I think makes people that teach something like mixing really think about, okay, well, how much of that part of the job is still necessary for students moving into the future?
But is the mixing, so you're saying I can put it before or after, seriously? Right?
Yeah, depends on the plugin.
Built-in EQs, reverb, and delay and all that.
This one in particular doesn't, not that I've seen, but they also try to say that they don't, this particular one doesn't use AI, but it gets you 95% of the way to essentially that first mix that then you can continue to edit, tweak, add effects to otherwise. And I think that's maybe one of the most common expressions you'll hear when talking about AI is how much of it gets us 95% of the way there. Quick question for the room. How many of you have used something like ChatGPT to actually create or generate? So most of or a good portion of the room has done that. Can you give me examples of something you've used ChatGPT for to write, either related to school, et cetera? We'll just work our way around. Yeah.
So I'm teaching a class that's fully online, so before the semester started, I put some of the paper prompts in there just to see what it would generate.
Yeah.
So in case the students use that.
Yeah.
And I did it 3 or 4 times to give iterations. And actually, I did the following conversation with some of my students in my theater class. They actually didn't know about ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Shocking, because we had our college, my favorite schools, like had this intervention moments back in January. Like,
Yeah.
oh my God, this was gonna happen. So.
Yeah. Excellent.
I'm not
What?
teaching, but I actually wrote a music book after I used ChatGPT.
Yeah. Wrote a music book. Interesting. Others? Yes. Marcus. Uh-huh. Yeah. Get ChatGPT to fail. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Hmm. So question, how much time did you spend on prompt engineering? Okay.
I had multiple prompts.
Sure.
To figure out what am I going for.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just need to say, okay, give me a song more like this.
Yeah.
Talking about, different scenarios, but I wanted very specific and context.
Sure.
So in that case, it still felt cold.
Yeah.
From my experience. And we're probably gonna come back.
Yeah. We actually, we're going to get back to ChatGPT here in a little while.
So I want to pick up on where Sean, there's something we're going to talk to our students about in terms of actual.
Yeah.
Like ChatGPT and or AI.
Yeah.
But also things like you're a student on speaking accommodated for technical grade.
Yeah.
There are going to be some complications. Yeah.
For sure.
Whether it's show I did bunch there or not.
Yeah.
But there are students who fully route up, gonna cover that later, so
Uh,
I wanted to throw it out there.
It's a great question, a great thing to bring up. So we will talk about here in a second that the Copyright Office just made a ruling on how much you can copyright protect an AI generated piece of music. And they said to the degree that it was created by the AI, it cannot be copy protected, right? So that means a huge part. Now, how we trace that back, what percentage of that beat that you made in the song that ultimately went viral, that's something for the blockchain software that doesn't exist yet. But they have said that if it was generated by AI, you can't. So only related to the pieces that the human actually did.
If you're so specific that it works against computer program, same with computer program.
Sure.
That is specific in that program, say I now have that topic. So even if you were to follow up on strongly here, like with chat, and make it be.
Yeah.
You actually want to only says zero.
Yeah.
It's shown that chat your AI created it. The same with I made this I use this model that it does not have game thing. Most of it has document capabilities for so improve your game base and stuff. That's about it. So your this is now what we're going to give.
And even closer example, the BandLab people talk a lot about a non-musician that was a gamer. This was a couple of months ago that needed music for his game streams, and he kept getting copyright strikes on YouTube because he would just upload copyrighted music along with his game streams. And so he jumped over to BandLab, used their song starter to generate all of his music, and ultimately had a song hit 500 million streams. He's on tour now. He's not a musician at all, but it was generated entirely by AI. So, yes. And I'm sorry, actually over here, you had your hand
Sorry.
up. Mm. Mhm.
They stated their website, especially some of the crazy. It was days of the time. But they are evaluating. Evaluating other areas, and they have they pull together, go to copyright.gov and just click on the artificial intelligence link.
Yeah.
And we were just discussing this. They are having roundtable discussions, and they're breaking it down by subject matter. So literary maybe 19, visual arts maybe second, audio visual maybe 17, music and sound recordings maybe 31. General public, people like us, they're having listening sessions, but in one way. We can't participate in it. We can hear the people they brought together that are discussing. This is my understanding, the way they have it written here. And then they're going to have calls, and then make a decision on how they're going to handle registration based on all of these different areas, including us, which are the main sectors. So even though what was being reported 2 weeks ago was like, yeah, you got to keep in touch, that was still in the back part. The thing that came to them as a physical art, and they did not consider that to be a registration because then I have to put in touch to get it.
Yeah.
They not ruled. If I'm understanding this, please, all of you lawyers here, go to this site and tell me if I'm wrong. I don't think they ruled in our world yet.
So at South by. Perfect. Excellent. I was listening to a thing from South by Southwest. My understanding was different. So, but it's possible that that's something that's, yeah. Yeah. There's mountains of litigation to come, I'm sure, in all of this content for sure, because the biggest question in AI is, what was it trained on? And are those musicians going to be compensated, or artists or writers or et cetera? So yeah, for sure. Was there a couple other hands up? Cody.
Creators, I'm talking to short term people who are concerned about syncing licensing.
certain things that you see for those purposes, more than worried about creating them. So.
Right.
That seems to be, when my thing on Sunday, Sam Hollander's going to talk about how he is approaching songwriting and his, colleagues with what's on.
Yeah. Excellent. Yes.
I was speaking to a startup that invested in this, AI generated. And then it was only instrumental music. And their whole business model is to generate the music, release it on their label, distribute it and promote it on the streaming services using, by the way, AI. And they were generating between 10 and $12 million a year just off of this cycle of releasing music, generating, releasing, and promoting that music on the streaming platform.
Yeah.
Completely hands-on.
Yeah.
And they're receiving all the royalties.
Yeah. So I think it's probably a matter of very little time before the Googles, the Spotifys, the Apples say, gosh, this is a pretty decent revenue stream. Why don't we just use our own AI to generate and compete directly with, at least in certain categories? So it's a great question. Other feedback. Great discussion. Good stuff. So let me just kind of jump you into some of the next things. More directly related to a lot of what we do, AI, and then obviously app-based gamification in music and entertainment education. So how many of you are using either online platforms, and they could be AI or not necessarily, but outside of classroom for flipping your classroom or for teaching content that otherwise might have used to have been live inside the classroom environment? Anybody? Yeah, can you give me some examples? Is anybody using any app-based training for their students to work on things outside of class? Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Teacher in my program, she's piano.
Yeah. I've given an example recently just where this Simply Piano app is somebody I've worked in audio for a long time, but I had never sat down to really build up my my sight reading skills as much as I felt like I could or should have. And so my 7-year-old daughter demanded one night that I download the Simply Piano app so she could dive into learning piano, and then proceeded to spend hours learning how to read music and play piano. And I couldn't get her off the thing. And she learned more and faster in one night than some friends of ours that I had seen working with a human teacher for a period of a couple of years. So it was shocking to me to see just how fast somebody could learn with an app that was constantly using both gamification and reinforcement learning, and having you tackle things with real songs that she already knew. And then both my other kids, 12 and 16, dove in the exact same way. I've never had to ask them twice, hey, go do your piano, no complaints. And they complain about everything. So all the moreover for us, I definitely see some of these things becoming fixtures in our educational process, whether we're in higher ed or not. One of the things that I've done for a long time was have students go through using courses like LinkedIn Learning outside of class, where they'll work through some course on mixing or recording or audio for video, lighting, and they go through that outside of class and take quizzes on it before coming in to then apply those skills on a different project that we're doing inside of class. Now, that's not using AI specifically, but it does do that same effect of gamifying the process, exposing them to the content outside of class, and then coming back and applying that in a classroom environment. And I think it's probably a really short matter of time before we start seeing that for absolutely every topic that we teach. Morgan.
But I absolutely agree with those things, and what I found. There are a lot of evidence that I'm like, so I built my badging system inside of the institute of badging at campus. And I assign and look in these different assignments, either from, automated courses that they can take, or things that I have created for them to work through, so I can integrate either these automated courses, I can integrate things with Google Classroom.
Yeah.
Social networking platform that was work
Yeah.
And so I integrate those kinds of things to my badging system into Canvas, and then I gamify that process with the Canvas functionality where you can lock content so they have to complete the boundaries and certain things where they can press to the on. And by generating the badging system, you can trigger that they earn badges on the way through. Trigger that either single module or collection badges.
Yeah.
And I've had success with students progressing through things like that, where I split the classes, or in some cases, during the creative semesters, like in the session, I can take the course and make it predominantly asynchronous.
Yeah.
What does a badge, I mean, like, the grade?
Depends on how I feel. I'm sure some people you get to set it. So for some of them, you know, the way that I do that is I set them up at the beginning of the semester about the badging, and I put some value levers around it, right? So if you complete it through to these particular badges, here are the competencies that you gain, here's the knowledge that you gain, or here are the course outcomes. So I will often tie it to what the course outcomes are supposed to be. And then I can tell students, you know, that certain course outcomes, you've got a certain level of mastery, tie it to the different mastery processes. In Canvas, or whatever you're learning. So I do that, and also with tie it into what kind of professional skill set does this equate to, or these professional knowledge does this equate to? And, you know, I promote it around almost like in-house needs. Because that's the thing. Okay, well, we're going to do it in class. In class, but if you were more incentivized to do it, by the fact that
Is the badging system a function inside of Canvas specifically?
it is, so
Okay.
it is an add-in that we have that's live at our institution. It's called Badger KER. And you can create your own badges. You know, you can create the name of the badge, you tie it to whatever the metrics are, whatever content they have to get through inside of Canvas itself, and you can set certain things, right? So for certain things, I need them to score a certain points, so I don't actually give them credit for it until they get the threshold of points. Once they get the credit, if the trigger that they've met the requirement to earn that, you can create your own image for the badge. So if you want it to be reflective of like the college, university, that way.
Very cool. Sorry.
Yeah, we've been integrating that as well, building OS for speaker series and other events that are on campus, kind of a little bit more to launching the vision that at some point the students going to wallet that's going to have quality blockchain based. OS say I was part of X, Y, and Z, that becomes what the ultimate would be a digital resume. You know, we've had some discussions about issuing diploma status.
Yeah.
And then I'm using Midjourney for my virtual tech class for students to build out their own collabs for other on-campus. No prompts to control it.
Yeah, I'm throwing up for those that haven't. Has anyone who has seen or used Midjourney, the AI image generator? Wow, most of the room not. It's an image, text to image generator that if you look on the website right now, see if I could get some examples of this, but it's Midjourney art. So everything you see here on the screen right now was created by typing in a text prompt into this AI. And you can see the level of quality that it's able to do. So obviously that's going to have pretty substantial impacts on things like graphic design, art education. When you can type in a piece of text into an AI and get back something that would take a Photoshop Illustrator hundreds of hours to do. One example of this, I was talking to a former student of mine that's produces full-time on Spotify. I've got some audio come back in. And one of the ways he's built his career, and he makes a great living, was by making sure that every song had some epic piece of art, and his brother is a 3D illustrator. And so he said one of his primary budget line items every month was he spent several $1,000s a month on art to go with his releases. And then I showed him Midjourney and Stable Diffusion, and they spent a Saturday just trying different prompts, exploring the technology. And he said, we probably generated 1,000 images, but 50 of them were, fantastic. And he said, I'll never need to hire a graphic designer again. So that was $2,000 a month from one person going into that particular pie that's now gone. So that's going to continue to change all sorts of art generation. So thanks for pointing that out. So that's on the production and mixing side with a little bit of education. ChatGPT, we could probably spend the entire day talking about all by itself, but I want to open it up. Who has not actually got a chance to play with ChatGPT yet? Okay, so still a decent amount. And how many of the rest have got to see it just a little, but you've not actually explored it for using for your classroom purposes? Okay, so that's a lot of others. So let me just open it up here just because it is, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around just what you can do with it if you don't have it. So I'll just go to chat.openai and show you a few of the ways that, that I've used it for class. So for example, right now there's a fair amount of, number one, it's a language model, large language model that was trained on everything ever written and all of the contents of the internet. So its knowledge base cuts off at, I think, September 2021. So it's not kept up to date. It's not aware of anything that happened after that date. But this large language model is not a computer program in the traditional sense. It'll answer simple math questions wrong, for example, but it's designed entirely to take what it learned from, I think it was 170 billion parameters of analyzing all of that text data. And it just tries to guess at what the next word should be. So one thing that I was showing David Schreiber, for example, was we were thinking through some future master's degree classes. And so I said, can you write me a syllabi for a master's? Well, somebody give me a class example, something that a class you're either interested in proposing or something you've been looking to build. And let's see what ChatGPT can come up with. Okay, can you write me a syllabi for a master's class or an undergrad class? Okay, for a master's level college course in mixing music. Please include a 15-week schedule of topics. And so when we feed that in, we'll see what it can come up with here. It usually takes a few seconds. And it doesn't work every single time, but we're going to see what it comes up with. I do love how polite it is. Sure, here's a syllabus for a master's level course in mixing music. Course title, mixing music. Course description, the course will explore the art and science of mixing music with a focus on using audio workstations, DAWs, to achieve professional sounding mixes. And we can let this run, but I can tell you right now, it's going to give us a pretty great looking syllabi for mixing music. And moreover, ChatGPT remembers the previous parts of the conversation. So anything that you go, you know what? I think, what if we do an 8-week version of this? You can just say, can you now make that an 8-week version? You can say, what should I cover every single week? What are the key questions or key takeaways the students should have? And it will, remembering the previous parts of the conversation, just keep generating. Now, the one big downside is that it will confidently answer wrong, just like with the exact same gusto as it will answer correctly. So at the moment, you still have to be a content expert to be able to assess, is the output good, or is there any part of this that's nonsense? Because you can definitely still get nonsense, or even they'll talk about the AI will hallucinate, creating things that aren't there. And that's even a challenge with GPT-4, which has just been released. So here you can see the week by week schedule, introduction to mixing with the content that needs to be in there, equalization, compression, reverb, and delay, and it continues to write. I have used this to write projects, to rewrite rubrics, to help students write scripts for videos they were shooting, or for voiceovers for the audio that they needed to record. All of my students are using ChatGPT for those purposes. I am grateful I don't have a ton of essays in my classes, because that would put me in a much more challenging position, like you were talking about. How has anyone tackled trying to put some fences up with students' ability to use ChatGPT this semester? Has anyone found anything that they've explored specifically?
Put fences up. So when I started doing integrating it with my site.
Yeah.
So I'll get them to use the platform in certain ways. it's changed how I structure my content, definitely. And there's also, idle threats where it's, hey, I'm gonna use another AI to try and see if you use the AI, but, they're not very accurate. And so rather than just fighting it, okay, you know what, you have to use it, you have to fight it.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yes, Clyde. Thank you.
Respectfully disagree. I the assignment back to something that was discussed in class. Okay, or is unique to that class experience. It's not gonna find it on the web.
I agree with that. Yeah, as long as. Yeah.
That said, how many of you have heard that Microsoft put a $10 billion investment into OpenAI in order for a third of the company? So they've now integrated it with Bing, the web search engine you've never used before. But Bing has now got ChatGPT built directly in and is able to do something that ChatGPT can't do, which is cite sources and pull information from across the web. Right now, it's only rolled out to a limited number of users, but you can bet that it's going to be
That's another
completely out.
checking that it's not allowing your students to use online sources.
Couple things. Odie.
Try to use more authentic assessment, say, music history class where they have to compare and contrast their own lives, their own musical text with the subject covering. So
Yeah.
they have to get that critically to write the paper, or some of the paper projects, we've got stuff coming up where they're having research subjects in here for the class.
Yeah.
So it's different spitting out paper.
And I think that that's probably, well, if you've seen, I've got a thing open here on the screen. Both Microsoft and Google have announced Microsoft's version is called Copilot, which is going to be essentially the functionality of ChatGPT built into all Microsoft apps. So is anyone old enough to remember Clippy? This was a great little tool that we had in the late 90s that you could ask it to help you with a document and then it would fail in a spectacular way. And so when it comes to this, though, if you haven't got to see it, do a little Googling, or I'll post a link to this website later, because as you're typing, it will give suggestions. It'll give you a first draft of whatever it is that you've started. And you can use ChatGPT for that now, but it's pretty limited. Everything is kind of stored in individual conversations. Sometimes your history just disappears and won't come back until the next day. But when Microsoft builds it in, and Google just announced the same thing, it's going to be built into all Google Docs so that you can just start typing. So we now have to assume that the students will absolutely just be using AI to write a lot of it. So we're going to have to change the way we do assignments. Yes, sir.
So, as much as it can actually search online, it seems to me that it still comes down to context, especially if you're asking it to speak on two seemingly disconnected things. For instance, if I asked it to think about what the philosopher Kierkegaard might say about the MMA and the MLC and how that applies to AI, right? I mean, very different things, and it needs really context.
Yeah.
Right.
So one thing, I think Marcus was talking about it, just typing in a prompt into ChatGPT or any of the AIs, especially if it's not a terribly specific prompt, is going to give you fairly bland output. But there's one of the key careers that is shaping up to be the next 10 years worth of growth is that of a prompt engineer. And that's where you use specific series of prompts to tell the AI how you want it to behave. So for example, I was using it to write a children's book with my 7-year-old the other day. And we went through and I gave it a bunch of details. Please write me a children's book. But then as I started digging into the prompt engineering, I said, I want you to act as Dr. Seuss. I want you to behave as though you are this thing. And by giving it those details and telling it how I wanted to act and the tone that I wanted it to use. And as I got more and more specific, the output got substantially less bland and substantially more creative. And so right now there are whole websites, forums of people that are working on how you create the best prompts to get the most definitive output. So that is changing rapidly, even if it wasn't that case 2 months ago. Yes.
I've been having them actually use ChatGPT and then evaluate
Mm-hmm.
the material. So go ahead and ask the question of them and then evaluate how correct it is or incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
And then also have them do reflections.
Yeah.
On So here's what it generated. Reflect on that. Tell me how that would fit into your career plan or your answer to this question.
Yeah.
You know, those tools that test whether ChatGPT, they're useless.
Yeah.
We.
None are definitive
I
at this
had a
point.
business school colleague actually run some exams from 2019 through the checker, and it said, "Oh yeah, they use ChatGPT."
Interesting.
It exists in 2019.
Well, ChatGPT didn't, but previous versions of the GPT language model did in 2019. So.
Yeah, and I don't know which tools you use, but yeah, it's hard to check it.
Yeah, it is. There's any of the ones currently out there do not have 100% accuracy at determining whether text was AI generated. Marcus.
Sloan mentioned something that I would say, earlier I did say that he is very good at audio. At some point, perhaps someone goes in and understands, listen.
Sure.
But right now, that, you have a hard time writing something the way you have to say it in sound.
Yeah. Yeah.
Reflections, revisions, be one way of kind of checking if that's what I was saying. I don't know if you're there, but they're both speaking to adding the personal experience and you connect what you've done and you reflect on what you've done. You know, what was this problem? You know, your students who may be you're writing, and that's it. Reading, making this sound the way a 17-year-old would write it. When I ask student interviews, I have the opportunity to ask her to reflect, or what did you think? What are the three things you took away from this? Some insights to, okay, was this really your writing, really your experience, or you know, is that thing? Also, going to a series of revisions. So here's your first draft, or revise X, Y, and Z. So tell me why. Why did you decide to revise this in this way, or how to do it?
Yeah.
And that makes sure this for the check, if you will, as opposed to rewrite the process, rewrite the
Yeah, absolutely.
over on both parts, but it's a way of correcting this.
That or you go back to pencil and paper. So if everybody's excited about grading those again.
Well, similar to that. Oh, sorry.
No, by all means.
I have also just given an exam at the end of class. Said, tell me what we covered today. And then they're locked into what we covered today.
Yeah.
You know, what did we cover today? And what are your thoughts? Or what were the three most significant things you think you learned today? Questions like that.
Can't ChatGPT that. That's great.
I should read where a professor talking about going back to pencil and paper, where a professor goes around the room and makes a mark on the page, and they have to write around it. And it requires everybody to write in class.
Interesting.
Yeah, I've heard a bunch of that. Kind of what Mark was saying, if it seemed unclear, just talk to the student and say, tell me about your ideas for this paper.
Yeah.
And kind of to Sean's thing, like the prompt I sent in, like a pretty complex prompt, and so it was not engineered, and so the answer I got was very generic because I had a lot of names, a lot of names, and just said according to so and so, and there was no depth behind the paper. So it would, in my instance, would have taken students probably a significant amount of time
Sure.
to actually to develop a good essay. Would have probably taken hours.
Yeah.
To load the prompt because it was and it also at the time I did this in January. I had put there was a word limit on the thing, and it said I can't do that. It just
Right.
stopped at like roughly 800 words. It just mid sentence.
Yeah.
That was it. Which I found comforting because that means they couldn't actually do the whole thing.
You just have to tell it, would you mind continuing?
Yeah.
And it'll just keep writing from where it left off. So, plus with the new $20 a month, ChatGPT Plus, it removes that character limit. So, so if a student's willing to spend a couple bucks, then it saves that.
I'd be curious to ask them too, like how, I know educators spend a lot of time trying to figure out offenses, no offenses. And as I said, in my school in New Jersey, most of the students weren't even aware of this. So I'm also wondering like how much effort. I know students will always there'll be somebody who's willing to do
Sure.
anything to not do the work. But I'm wondering how many people have discovered like, oh yeah, what percentage of their students actually do, or actually use this without being prompted by the faculty?
I think at the beginning of the semester, most students were not aware because most students are not spending time thinking about what's happening in AI. But I think when those faculty that tried it to do some writing, especially if they dug in a little bit to the prompts, that's when it was like, oh, wow, this is a problem. So I think faculty, this is one of the few areas we might have got on the front end of things, at least being aware of. And then students now this semester, almost certainly now. In fact, I've talked to so many students that whether they're in my class or not, now they are using ChatGPT for all kinds of things. But at the beginning of the semester, they didn't know. But once you've used it once or twice and it saves you, God only knows how much time, it's just like a calculator. It's hard to go back.
Yeah, I mean, I took the stance that the students needed to understand the tool that they have, I use the example, if I'm lost in the woods, I've got a lighter in my pocket, I'm not rubbing two sticks together to make fire. So realize what you can do with it, what you can't do with it. And so I used to develop everyone.
Yeah, a bunch of friends of mine who teach history classes, like they use the first draft, kind of what Storm said, then evaluate that, started, and then use it as a start, and then it can be a great start, and then figure out, and then you take it from there.
Yes, ma'am.
This is going to sound a little like a dinosaur. It depends on your class, because this is not going to be appropriate for all classes. I'm still a fan of the exam, and I'm a fan of time pressure exam. And I'm a lawyer, I've taken 2 bar exams, and if you have ever heard of what a bar exam is like, you can make multiple choice questions extremely difficult. If you write the right answers and the wrong answers, just nuance enough. So for some of my classes, I don't have to deal with this, and then it's like, here's the test, you got a minute per question, go.
Yeah.
And you know it or you don't. So I do think the whole topic brings up some great questions for us to ask ourselves as educators about how do you actually measure knowledge? How do you measure skills? What is the best assessment of that?
Yeah.
I know papers have been around forever and people love them. I don't like them. Aside from the fact that it's a poor writing quality has. Create your substance, giving structure sense.
Right.
So, this is not a method of anything, or
Yeah.
Which is cool. And maybe, this can speak to a bigger crisis of how do we know that our students are learning anything? How are we assessing their actual, retained learning? And what are the best tools for it? Which is the bigger question around all of it, right? So.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting, but none of it also produces surprising. If any of you've ever gone to sit down and write a book for the first time, you really not start by Googling it to see if you can find it.
Yeah. No, actually not anymore. I just have ChatGPT make that first version and yeah.
So it's just an extension, and so much of ChatGPT stuff is garbage, because guess what? So much stuff later is garbage. So some of it is not so new, it's not strategy, it's not, it's not an extension of what we've been living all the time.
It is an extension, but it's right.
But the concept of doing a well-structured Google search, something our students are also not capable of doing. A really truly good Google search today, and if you have ever had knowledge, you can find a wealth of information. You go deep into the results to compile stuff, and then you got to contextualize. Is that site reliable? Is that site garbage? That's information from 2002. That's from 2022. That's a big,
Sure.
You've done them in your own head. The ability to do it this way is new.
Yeah.
But it just, I laugh at sometimes, you're like, it's world. And I'm like, that person.
Well,
One person's doing it.
I recently had to give a presentation to our faculty for the university. There were several people surrounded who said the same thing. In fact, Joe, that weren't Luke's supposed to make us, irrelevant 10 years ago? In the music industry, wasn't Napster, no one would ever want music anymore. Drum machines. We have these.
Sure.
Yeah, we have the. So it's
Yeah.
the same thing that the music industry had to adapt, same thing that online learning had to adapt. You're just reminded of what you're really supposed to be doing, and we'll adapt.
For sure.
The sky's gonna look a different color.
I think most of us have been around long enough to have been through enough of those technology transitions. But I think it's important also for many of our students who graduate, ideally, if they're getting a 4-year or a liberal arts education, they're learning how to learn so that they can move with the technology as it changes. So, but yeah, I think it's points well taken in terms of how are we actually assessing what they know, and are we doing that in a way that's compatible with current technology? It's great. Odie.
Yes, I get you can make multiple choice questions, trickier.
I'm not saying that works for every topic.
Sure.
Any
I'm
stress.
just thinking of what Storm said, that maybe this is the way to push us towards our experiences and causing them to care. And about what they're learning, they take a multiple choice or just not paper. I think that's what's going on.
For sure.
Well, certainly teaching them to care is one thing. The second, did you learn the knowledge? Can you explain this thing back to me?
Yeah.
What I'm saying about
Kind of the
care,
point.
by care, meaning how they learn the knowledge, apply it to their lives in other areas. That's what I mean by care. So
Well, that's a whole nother round.
It's not.
They offer as a project.
Right.
Right, and like apply, not a paper, generally is not gonna assess their application of that to their life. As much as a paper or instead of a paper with a profit, do your reporting budgets. Put together a press kit, right? Whatever the assignment may be. Do something that is a simulation of a real life activity. That often includes component pieces that are not just something she's checked, GPT that are written.
Yeah.
Application of that knowledge absolutely is critical, making sure it's there and they can apply it. And the good old paper, may or may not be serving the fun.
Yeah.
Correct, not even-
Great point. Sir.
It's really fascinating to have this conversation about, evaluating educational effectiveness. I mean, there are any number of assessments that we all know, not just paper, or multiple choice or whatever else. There was a great piece with John Oliver on AI.
That was a great one.
And, what I remember the most out of that conversation was, they were using an analogy with lawyers. They were saying, something I'm paraphrasing, but something to the extent of, ChatGPT is not going to replace the need for lawyers to write contracts. But the lawyers that are using ChatGPT or any other generative AIs are going to replace the ones that are not.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, what I kind of see AI as a tool. And then how are we going to integrate this to improve student learning? Maybe not necessarily to evaluate it. That's a whole other conversation. But yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah. Although you can use it to evaluate, you can copy and paste your students' essays into it and say, tell me, assess this based on these dimensions of, yeah, you absolutely can. And it'll give you feedback and notes to tell them as well. So, and then just ask it to do it in Shakespearean and you've got you'll get quite the reputation. That's right. That's right. Yeah, for sure. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, because you're not only comparing it to anything that's been published, but as you grade, it puts those papers into the data. So the student can't borrow a computer file from somebody who took the class last year. And it works, it gives you a score, a percentage. And like one of the things that the students have the most problems with, they're doing reports on musical organizations, professional organizations. And I'll get high counts or turned in because they quote things. Rather than writing, they're just quoting stuff they see on the website.
Yeah. although until all of that stuff, that content has been logged in, turn it in, every time you click generate on one of the generative AIs like ChatGPT, is creating something totally new, which I think actually, having just finished my dissertation last year, when I first turned it in, it came back and said like 18% of my dissertation was from something else. I was like, this is impossible. Like, I know I wrote this. And ultimately, a huge portion of that 18% was either my references, which of course followed standard, or were from papers I had turned in earlier. So it was declaring plagiarism against my own work. So, but I do think when we get a couple of years out from now, one of the things that people, AI researchers are concerned about is once all the AI has been trained on its own data and it's eaten its own dog food, then things like internal bias that are built into the system or algorithmically starts to regurgitate itself. So eventually there's not going to be any original quotes because everything will have already been said in every way that is possible to say it. So I think that for researchers, especially, that starts to become a different like problem, because if you can't say something original because 50,000, an infinite number of monkeys have used an infinite number of typewriters via AI to write everything, what are we going to do then? I think that's another like fun thought experiment to explore. Yeah. Yes, Marcus.
Where do you see from that? So the thing that's concerning most now is earlier you were talking about using AI software.
Mhm.
That it's not using loops that are out there, it's creating all this stuff.
Yeah.
My question's always been, if someone has to code the AI,
Sure.
which to learn what's out there.
Right.
So it has to come from some
Training data, yeah.
source, right? In order for AI to know that it's there first.
Sure.
I have a client who's a graphic artist, and she's showing me her work, and she says, here's my work, I use AI for some parts of it, then I can copy it. And I'm like, well, how do you know this exactly composite doesn't exist? Like, oh, I just typed in, showed me 18th century African woman, and it gave me this image. I'm like, the graphical colors in it too. So
Yeah.
AI is pulling this where it knows this is what I think this 18th century woman looks like.
Sure.
And she juxtaposed with this graphical color. I am personally not 100% confident that it's not going to be that moves them from a corner of the world. Even this music,
Sure.
generous, very boost and crisp from works that are out there.
For sure. It's been trained on training data sets. The OpenAI has not said what the training data set specifically or how big it was for ChatGPT. And a lot of the companies are also not forthcoming with what their training data set was. It's actually Adobe this last week, who of course makes Photoshop and all sorts of visual editing software, announced that they were releasing their own generative AI built into Adobe so that you can do all kinds of things, but it was trained on their current stock data library database. So they actually can know what percentage of this image was due to this artist. And they've said that they're going to create a payments platform and a payment system to pay based on attribution and how much of your training data was used in the generation of this new piece of art.
Very close art.
Right.
The word that's bias.
Yeah.
Sorry, I use everything that's on the internet. There's some programming bias.
Absolutely.
It's just for AI. It's just the bias that has been fed. It's
Yeah.
always good as what it's fed.
Yeah.
So how do we know, that it's getting or unbiased, useful data?
I think we can safely assume it's not. It's getting whatever data went into it, and the bias that was built into that data is still baked into the cake. So, yes.
So, yeah. So building on this, these sort of issues were raised years ago, in a great work by, Walter Benjamin, spelled B-E-N-G, okay? Or, B-E-N-J-A-M-I-N. A work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction. So
Mhm.
he actually explored a lot of these issues back then. So I highly recommend that if you haven't already read that.
Yeah.
Walter Benjamin.
That was the 20th.
That's right, yes.
It was written in the 20th. It was only translated
That's right.
fairly recently.
2 minutes. All right. So let's see. So we can certainly, I can talk about ChatGPT all day and for the rest of the weekend. It is, and it's just one of many AIs happening. So we probably don't have the time to go into some of these other tools, but I'd love to show them to you in terms of, for example, video editing. So this is something that's changing the industry I'm currently teaching in, which is audio and video production. But this Descript video editor is different than anything like it or than anything similar before, in that you don't have to know how to edit video. You can capture your videos or just drop them in. It transcribes them all. And so especially for educational videos, you edit the video by editing the document. So I'll throw this up on my screen and you should be able to see the app itself. But in this case, you can screen record it. So I could have recorded this whole presentation with it. I think I just recorded with Zoom, but I'll edit this presentation in Zoom. So you'll see here's this video, and it appears as a Word document with a little timeline down below. And you can just select your text and say, remove all filler words, and any sort of ums, ahs, and ands will automatically be removed. So you can instantly remove any of that. You can say, remove any gaps. So if I had a bunch of 2-second pauses or I needed to think, you can do that. And then everything editing the video is literally a matter of cutting and pasting the text. And that does all of that editing. So if you're an educator that has, especially since COVID, started producing more videos for your students, an app like this is a game changer. I've produced hundreds of instructional videos, and this completely transformed the way I was able to do it, because I can just go in and chop out any text that's unnecessary, and it edits the video and puts it right back out for my students. Hugely helpful. That app is called Descript Video Editor. Descript, yeah. And so here you can see, back to projects. Here, for example, is a Photoshop tutorial that I made for some of my classes, and you can see all the text right here. And I've already gone through and said remove any filler words, and so it just finds them all and with one click removes them. But then the act of editing it is just as simple as editing a document. It is not, although for educators, there's they do the software as a subscription. There is a free version, you can download it, but I think it lets you do up to 4 hours worth of content first. And then you pay for how many hours of transcription you would need per month. Yeah. Both video and audio. It started off as a podcast audio only video editor, but this last year they added video and screen recording as components.
So it takes the out, it crossfades the video.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's a great tool.
It's a great tool.
I used it in podcast.
Yeah. It also has, speaking of this, the audio here, it won't play back obviously over Zoom, but they and multiple other video editing softwares have now added AI dialogue isolation. So you can have a very poor sounding dialogue track that with one click will almost go to being an SM7B in your face in a nicely acoustically treated room. It is one click. You can't even change anything about it, but it'll take dialogue that is in really bad shape that it would take an audio engineer like myself a lot of time and tools to fix, and one click it can make it sound fantastic. Did they just add one? Yeah, DaVinci Resolve just added one too. Excellent. Well, we didn't even get to talking about virtual reality, but that's okay. There's plenty of content here. And then tomorrow morning, my presentation at 8, for those that are going to be awake, will be on how audio engineering faculty made it through the pandemic and continue to teach what we teach, even in spite of having to go remote. So for those that are interested in that, love to see you tomorrow morning and chat more about that. Thanks so much for having me. Good to see you all. Sure.